I think in total I only spent like, I don't want to lie, maybe 40 minutes of practice for the first round, because I was kind of able to skip the normal routine of approaching a track. But I had to find a way how I could save time, but still trying to be competitive on the same time.
I mean, out of the interesting things about you and in general, you're actually pretty famous that you have that pretty rough internet connection. I think it was 360p, wasn't it? And you're also pretty good with liveries. So,
Yeah.
should I say welcome to the podcast? And he achieved a lot of things in Gran Turismo so far. One of those things is, what was it?
Mitsubaru. Mitsubaru.
It's Subaru.
I think it all started with me creating a Subaru STI livery for the Toyota Gia Supra back then. Because back then we still had the Toyota Gia Cup, and it was the only year, like back in 2019, which I also participated in. And before I wanted to join the race, I was like, hey, let's try to create a livery, you know? I was a little bit bored at that time, but I also wanted to create an interesting one, a funny one on the same time. Because I knew that so many people dislike crossover liveries, and it was a little bit funny to see the reactions as well. So, with my favorite brand being Subaru, I was like, hey, let's try to create a design or like a livery for the Gia Supra, which is essentially the same as the Group 3 WRX we've had back then, right?
Yeah.
And in the end, that's not really where Mitsubaru started, but obviously if you also followed the World Rally Championship back then, where Subaru, Mitsubishi, and all the other brands were also competing in, yeah, Subaru and Mitsubishi were like the main rivals. So to add a little bit more fuel into the fire there, I was like, hey, let's put a Mitsubishi livery onto the Subaru, or even vice versa, so that we can call it a Mitsubaru.
And it became a legend.
Yes. So I'm like the unofficial CEO actually of the Mitsubaru Motorsport Company, by the way. So if we want to talk about fear of the Mitsubaru cars, then we can maybe do it afterwards. But
we will have a private discussion a little bit later, a potential collaboration between us. That's okay with you.
Oh wait, did we just spoil the collaboration here? Oh my god, what did we
I
just
don't know.
do?
I don't know how the public is going to react to that.
Hopefully positively. Hopefully.
I don't think they will mind maybe even some other collaborations with Subaru as well. I mean, who knows, really?
Yeah,
there are so many options that we can explore, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But apart from being a great designer and in general a really fast guy, I gotta say, I might ask, like, what was your first introduction to sim racing? How did all of this start?
I think I have to start all the way back when I got my first game for the PlayStation 1. Because when I was a kid back then, I used to play with toy cars a lot. And when my parents saw that, they bought a PlayStation 1 with Gran Turismo 2 for me. And I think on the same time, one of my first games was Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit 2. But I really liked to play Gran Turismo 2 a lot back then due to the amount of cars we've had there, where you were also able to see and explore the different amount of brands, the car models, the tuning, the racing, and just the way how Gran Turismo 2 was back then. Because normally in Germany, we tend to see lots of Golfs, C-classes, or like 3 Series from BMW, and the A4s from Audi all the time. But seeing a Nissan Skyline GTR or like those JDM cars back then, right? It was like really, really cool. And that's where I really fell in love with the Gran Turismo franchise. I kept playing it a lot. Okay, obviously not a lot because I was still a kid back then. So I also had like my limits, what I was allowed to play. Well, let's say how many minutes or hours I was allowed to play per day. But then it went on with me getting GT4, then GT5 and GT6 afterwards. And during GT6, like 1 year after the release of Gran Turismo 6, there was like a Christmas seasonal event going on. And one of the challenges was where we had to choose the Pagani Huayra at Bathurst, and it was on the same time an overtaking challenge. And up until that point, I was still using a controller and just playing casually, because whenever I did a time trial lap during one of those seasonal events, my pace was always like around, I would maybe say at best 2 to 3 seconds off the pace all the time. But for some reason during that Christmas event, I was quite good at it. Maybe there was also one of the reasons why I was good at it was that we did not have to create a setup for the car. So all of us had to use the same setup of the Pagani in the end. But for some reason, I was quite good at it and finished P5 globally, and also the best one by using a controller. And on the same time, the guy who managed to secure the world record there was Daniel Holland, who was still a member of Team Redline back then. And even I knew who TRL was, because if you had a look on the top 10 leaderboard, you were mainly seeing the TRL guys there, right? So in my mind, I was like, hey, you managed to get a good result there. And then just for fun, because it's just asking a question, right? Can you not maybe ask Daniel Holland if it's possible to join Team Redline? Yeah, right? Because I was just asking a question without even having the attitude of, hey, I really want to be there and I want to be a member of Team Redline. I was just asking for fun. So I think even on the same day, I received a message from Daniel Holland saying that he wanted to ask his teammates as well as his manager about it first before going back to me. And 2 days later, he replied by saying, yeah, you can join us. And I was like my first reaction obviously was quite happy. Like I was just overjoyed with the fact that I was able to join them. But then after that, the realization kicked in, because I was like, yeah, okay, you made it to Team Redline, but was it a really good idea? Because now I have to buy a steering wheel, I have to buy or like create my own rig, then now I have to start driving competitively. So I was like realizing whether it was a really good idea to do that in the end. So you can maybe say that I accidentally joined the sim racing scene, because it was never my goal or ambition to even do it in first place. But after I got my first wheel, which was a Logitech G27, and me desperately trying to improve my pace to still be a member of Team Redline, I guess I can say that fortunately I became a better driver in the end. And yeah, I'm here now.
Yeah, that's basically my next question, but I think you already answered 3 of my next questions in one.
Okay, sorry.
But no, it's perfect. It's perfect, actually. But the realization of actually you're on the controller, and you know what? I'm holding that controller, and wow, look at this. I'm quick. Let's join Team Redline. Why not? And they actually say yes.
Yes.
This is kind of, I guess, the dream come true of any kind of competitive esports person right now, literally.
Yeah.
So you were actually on the controller at that point,
Yeah.
and I guess you were limited by the amount of time that you were actually spending. But now it's actually trying to hold the position in the team, and I guess trying to prove yourself to the team and eventually try to go for something more.
Exactly.
But you're already quick. So what was that point where you actually realized that, you know what, I am quick? Or it was just like, okay, it happened, and well, let's adjust to the situation.
I'm not quite sure if I realized suddenly that I became quick, but I think the whole development and the way how I managed to become a better driver became just, I don't want to say naturally, but I just understood it in without any realization. It just became the way it is in the end. So for example, when I was doing the license test back in Gran Turismo 2 or Gran Turismo 4 back then, because if you wanted to achieve gold, you had to drive the normal, or like, let's say the right way in order to secure gold. So back then I think I had a general knowledge of how to how to be a good driver on the track. But obviously, nailing a sector or like one corner is like different than nailing the entire lap or like even being consistent throughout the entire race distance. So at the beginning, like when I jumped over from a controller to a steering wheel, my pace was still like around 2 seconds off the pace. But nevertheless, I still didn't want to give up on myself, and I wanted to be patient, asking for some help, because it's really important if you wanted to become a better driver in the end. Because if it wasn't for the help of my teammates, then I wouldn't have become a better driver in first place. Because back then we also used to do some league races back on GT Planet, where we were using the Formula Gran Turismo a lot without ABS. That also helped my braking input a lot, and also the way how you had to apply the throttle all the time. Because with that car, you had to be so smooth in order to be quite fast in the end. And maybe that's like the first step where I managed to develop my driving style in the end, like the smooth driving style. Um, but it's like a whole journey in the end. It's like you shouldn't really expect to reach, let me just say, the beginning of my journey. I would describe it as level 0. And in order to become or like to achieve level 100, you cannot expect to reach that level within one day or like even within a week, in my opinion. It's like a whole journey where you have to overcome so many different challenges and difficulties, because so many people, like if they want to become a better driver for themselves, they end up giving up in the end, because they either lose up the motivation, or they don't really have the patience to see themselves become a better driver in the end, because so many of them, they want to see a big improvement. But in my opinion, even if you manage to improve by 1/10 only, that's still an improvement. And 1/10 over, let's say, over a race where you even do, 10 laps, that can give you that can bring you like a lot of seconds in here, or maybe 1 second in the end. So even if you improve by 1/10, that's already like a huge improvement. Because yes, once you want to set the world records and want to find the tiniest amount of thousands of seconds there, that's really, really difficult. But if you want to become a better driver in the end, like even those tiny improvements, it's something you should really cherish for, in my opinion. So yeah, like to answer your question, I had to overcome so many difficulties and challenges in order to become a better driver. But I think once I saw the gap getting closer and closer, I started to feel a little bit, not really relaxed, but happy that I could somewhat show them that, hey, it wasn't a mistake signing me in the end. Because I desperately wanted to show them that, hey, I could improve on myself, and also help you guys, getting a good team result in the end. So, yeah.
No, that's very, I think, as you described your journey, it's literally step by step. But one of the questions that usually people ask me, and basically this is what I do, I teach people how to drive in general. So they ask me like, okay, I'm actually okay on the controller, but when I go to the wheel, I'm naturally slower. And then my question always is, but do you actually understand what's going on? Do you understand the dynamics of the car and what's really working and not working in the game? So, for example, you're just using references. I'm using a lot of references. I don't know how you drive. Maybe that's going to be one of my next questions. So I'm using a lot of references in whatever I do. And I tell them, are you using references? And they're like, yeah, okay, occasionally. But then I'm like, you cannot occasionally use references, for example. You really have to build a structure. And you really need to find the flow in each corner. And you can only get it done by connecting the dots in the corner.
Yeah.
And I guess my next question is, did you really understand the structure, or did you have a knowledge what was going, let's say, behind all of the interface or the beautiful cars, and did you really understand what's going on in the code itself and what's actually making you quicker or what's not making you quicker?
Like even back then, I realized that the breaking points were the not for nothing in the end. Like you should use the breaking points as a reference, right?
Yeah.
But I think it gets more technical and difficult if you want to know which gear you want to use, for example, if you want to take the corner. Because there's certain cars out there where you're like, should I exit a corner while using the first gear still or shifting up on second already? Because, for example, with the Mercedes AMG, like the 20 car, if you want to accelerate out of a low speed corner, sometimes you would have this situation where if you would use the first gear, it feels like the car accelerates faster, obviously, but it's like a lot more unstable on the rear. And you could also reach the rev limiter quite easily and quickly. But whereas if you wanted to use the second gear instead, the rear would become a lot more stable, but you would have less torque and power on the same time. But then you wouldn't really reach the rev limiter as quickly as when using the first gear, right? So this is like one of those situations where I think if you want to know which gear you want to use for a corner, that's like one of the difficult parts. Also the weight transfer, I feel like, because obviously so many people want to try and brake as late as they can in order to minimize the the travel distance from the braking point towards the corner entry. But if you do that, then you're going to put all the weight of the car towards the front, and if you do that, you will just have more understeer into the corner. So in order to counter that one, you can maybe try to brake a little bit smoother before that, so that you would still load the weight of the car towards the front, but not as much as braking even later and harder in the end. Because this way you could maybe try to have a better turn into the corner. And this is also like really helpful for the race if you want to preserve your tires or like even look after your car in general. And these are like few things which, like you will learn once you really want to try and become a better driver in the end. Like these are like so many different things you have to try and combine together in order to nail the one lap. But once you understood how you have to drive, that's why I'm like, you should maybe try to focus on your race pace while trying to be consistent. Because yes, we all can try to nail for that one lap, but try to repeat it once again. Because if you are able to repeat it, that's what you're quite good at, in my opinion. And but as you said it before, like yes, we should all try to use some references here, even if there are like few corners there's not a braking point available. I try to use something else as a reference. So for example, the shadow of a tree or like the barrier on the left hand side once it starts to appear. Like I always try to experiment around while being on the track. And when I use the most comfortable setting for myself, then I try to be consistent with it. And even if I'm not as fast or like as quick as the other guys, then I try to analyze what they did differently compared to me. And then once I saw that, I try to apply it to myself instead.
So it's basically, you always answer all of my questions in advance, but thank you. No, you just give me more options, but it's good actually. It's good.
Hey, let's speech run the podcast. Let's go.
But no, let's go. But basically, I think my question or my next question was, you mentioned first and second gear right there. Mm-hmm. It gives you more torque, or it doesn't spin as much. In general, it makes the car more stable. So sometimes, for example, if you're in second gear, you have to start applying the power sooner.
Yes.
Sometimes, I'm saying. But how do you find that exact moment? So this is what I ask quite a lot. This is my main question. How do you know what gear to use, what line to use, or you just know it, or is it just experience, or you just experiment? Mm-hmm. So what was it for you at the beginning?
Let's say once I tackle a track in order to learn it in the end, I try to drive many laps on the same session without restarting, even if I manage to spin in the end. Because once you're on the track, like entering a time trial session, for example, you have, after completing one lap, or like the first lap, a delta shown at the bottom of the screen. And from there onwards, you can try to experiment around. So for example, I would maybe try to, like, if I use your example, in my case, like if the first gear or the second gear is quicker, so I would maybe try to use the first gear a lot when learning the track. And once I found a really good lap for myself in the end, that's why I also try to experiment around. So for example, if I want to accelerate out of a low speed corner, I would maybe approach it by thinking, okay, what happens if I use the second gear instead? Because on that corner, I was always struggling with the traction sometimes. So normally, or like logically speaking, if I use the second gear, I would minimize the amount of the lack of traction I would have there, like out of the low speed corner. But on the same time, I would have to see at one point, I would have to apply the throttle in order to make the second gear work in the end. And this is where I try to run many laps in total with the second gear after that. Because with the delta, you can also see as a comparison whether you even managed to gain time or even lost more time compared to the first gear. And then you can also try to find a lap time where once you find out at what point you have to apply the throttle for the second gear, there you can also compare that with your best attempt when you were using the first gear. And then once you made the comparison in the end, you can also see which one was even better for you, if it was the first gear or the second gear. And I think this is the same for iRacing or like for any other sim racing games, where we would move over to the telemetry instead and also have a look on the data, because that's really valuable. Even in motorsport as a race engineer or performance engineer, if you want to go through it with your driver, because data is so valuable if you want to know where you're even ending up losing the time. Because not only does the gear show it to you, but also how you brake and also how you apply the throttle. Because there's so many people out there who are quite aggressive in terms of the way how they apply the brake and the throttle. But if you can try to trail brake or even be so smooth on the throttle, you don't know how much time you can even gain there. So this is what the data or like the telemetry can show it to you even.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I do get that question quite a lot. And you explain the whole process of how it just goes and the true value of telemetry, which I'm always trying to explore. But from my experience and in my opinion, one of the best things that Gran Turismo did was introducing ghosts. They were around since forever, I think.
Yeah.
But for me personally, when I was just starting up, I was just constantly using the Delta and I was using the Ghost. And those two things helped me tremendously. And this is something that you cannot find in, let's say, other racing titles.
Yeah.
You can potentially find other lap times. You can find everything online these days. But having something like that built into the game where you can just click on the number one person in the world and just copy his inputs and copy his breaking points and everything that he does, it saves me a lot of time. So it just saves me, I don't know, I would probably be experimenting, testing something for 30 minutes, maybe hour, maybe even a couple of hours. And then I'm just like, okay, I'm going to record this telemetry data. I'm going to compare that with my own data. And all of a sudden, okay, I found a half a second there. So I don't know if it was something like that for you or you were the one that was actually posting those lap times. I mean, I know you were, but what was in the beginning?
So what I would always do, like especially during the 2019 season, I had quite a rough year in terms of my mechanical engineering degree because we were having so many projects, exams, assignments to do. And because of that, I had to try and find a method in reducing my practice time for the championship so that I could still use enough of my valuable time for my studies, but on the same time still being competitive on the races in order to secure those points. So what I did was, I was like, before I even went onto the track, I was always having a look on the replay first to see how they were setting their lap time first. So I think the first round of the Nations Cup in 2019 when we had the official season was with the Group 2 at Catalonia. And I think the meta car was the Honda NSX back then. So I was having a look on the replay to see where the braking points were and also the way how they were driving on the track. So, but I did not watch it for one time only, but I was watching it for multiple times so that I could even memorize it even. And obviously, memorizing the way how somebody was driving onto the track and not, well, let's say, and having the muscle memory for it is like something completely different, because having the muscle memory is something you have to obtain by driving yourself on the track, obviously. But what I did was I still tried to memorize it as much as I could, went onto the track. Then I realized, I kind of disliked the way how the Honda was driving, so I ditched it. Then I moved over to the Nissan GTR, and I felt more comfortable with the GTR. I did like 15 minutes of it, and then I knew that some of my other friends were also hosting a practice session online. So I joined them in the end, and there I was already able to see the race pace as well, and I was also able to practice with them immediately in order to get up to speed. And this way I was also able to find my own way of driving on the track, like even having my own way of the race pace in order to preserve my tires as best as I can. And because of that technique, I was even able to win the race and get the most amount of points in the end. So I think in total I only spent like, I don't want to lie, maybe 40 minutes of practice for the first round, because I was kind of able to skip the normal routine of approaching a track. But I had to find a way how I could save time, but still trying to be competitive on the same time.
But no.
And this is what I want to say, like, if you have people within your friend list or even within the community you know that you can practice with, you should use that as much as possible as an advantage in the end. Because yes, you can try to practice for a combo by yourself, but you will never know whether you will be even competitive in the end by not seeing what the other guys were doing first. And this is what I always wanted to make sure. Like, I wanted to make sure what the other people were doing on the same time, like what their race pace was like. So this is what I always tried to do first. And then I practiced with them first, and then after that I was able to see the data and also compare myself towards them. And then when I was kind of satisfied with my pace, I was like, okay, let's try to call it a day and also study for my other subjects for the following day. And yeah, it was quite intense. Like the 2019 online season was so, maybe I shouldn't say it, like horrible as a driver, because the amount of races we were having in that year, it was exhausting. I think one championship only, with one championship, I would just say as an example, just the Nations Cup, we had 40 races back then. And out of those 40 races, you needed 60 at least. Like, I think your best 16 scores were counted towards the end of the season. And now imagine, you have the Nations Cup having 40 races in total. Then you have the Manufacturers Cup also having 40 races in total. And then the Toyota Cup, I think, which had like 8 or 9 races in total, I believe. So yeah, this is why I had to try and find a way how I could save time. Because for me personally, I was like, okay, luckily, or like realistically, I don't have to do all the races. So I was just having a look on the calendar where I was like, okay, I don't want to say easily win, but let's say I can win that race. Probably, maybe. So I was mainly focusing myself and prepare myself for those rounds only, because I didn't want to waste my time into rounds where the end result would be either lucky due to the way how the race itself was structured, or where I knew that I wasn't really having the best pace with the car or even on that track. So I was kind of ditching those ones, but like focusing more towards the other ones where I knew I was able to get a good result there.
So basically you can say that the preparation went really well and it was very efficient.
Yes, I would maybe say my 2020, I'm actually quite proud of my 2020 season, because that's the year where I won the Manufacturers Cup. And because of COVID happening, we had the online season only before having the World Finals. And for the online season, we had 20 races in total. And out of those 20 races, we needed to have at least, or let's say 8 races at best, which were counted towards your end result. But in my case, I was only scoring 7 out of those 20 races. So I still needed one more score, but luckily it was still enough for me to qualify for Subaru for the World Finals.
Incredible.
So,
But no, it truly is incredible when you think about it, when you think about your journey and you were actually studying, and engineering degree is not something that you do overnight, and it really takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of skill, and a lot of time in general. But the way that you found the way to manage your time is actually pretty incredible. So
I think for me personally, I think this is something which is a little bit overseen by the other people, and also something which I'm kind of proud of myself. The preparation, or like the amount of time I had to invest into achieving my goals in the end. Because I think for 2020, which if we take the entire year as an example, I only did 8 competitive races, including the World Finals. Because for the World Finals, unfortunately, it was not possible to do a driver swap while playing online. So what they did instead was to host 3 Manufacturers Cup races. And I was doing the grand final in the end because it was at Interlagos, and I was like asking them, hey, I feel quite comfortable at this track. And I also won the top 16 Superstars race during the online season that year. So that's why I was like doing the grand finals only. But in total, I only did 8 races in that year. And compared to 2019, where I did so many races, including the Toyota Cup, right? So,
it's quite a journey. And I think I actually remember that race, and I remember it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. But you were trying to adjust your strategy by how much time you were actually losing in the pits based on the tires that you were using.
I'm actually surprised that I was the only one finding this out, because I'm like, hey, we are preparing for a World Finals, and the way how I know it from my team, like with Team Redline, when they also prepare for their own races on iRacing or like on the other sim racing competitions, they try out everything, literally everything, to see whether they can even end up finding some time in the end. And when I was testing the race strategy for Interlagos, I found out that once the AI exits out of the pits, and the softer your tire compound was, the faster the AI was also driving through the pit exit. So you were able to gain time automatically. So I was like, why should I even start on the soft tires if I can gain some time automatically through the pits? Yes, for the 2019 Grand Final, I decided to choose the safest strategy because I was starting on pole, and I wanted to try and drive away from the drivers behind of me. And this is why I opted to go with the soft tires in the end. But for the Manufacturers Cup, because of me not nailing the final corner in Sector 3, I lost like a lot of time on the uphill section and ended up P5. I was like, yeah, just go with your strategy in there with the hard tires. And luckily it worked out in the end. Yes, so this is why I was like, why should I even start on the mediums or like even on the soft tire compound if I can gain so much time during the pits automatically? So, yeah.
It makes sense when you do it like that, but you actually have to be the first one that does it. And usually being the first one that does something like that, it's not easy because you don't know what you're doing. I mean, maybe you will know that what you were doing, but in general, you have to see, you have to test, you have to come up with an idea of something like that. So I think it's pretty genius that you actually try to do something like that. And I remember that I don't think I was having this channel. I wasn't even starting. I think I was just playing Gran Turismo at that point. And I watched one of your videos, and I actually remember that one. And you were like, okay, I can gain a bit more time there. And I'm like, this guy is insane. I can't even get into 2 seconds on Interlagos, and he is trying to figure out his strategy based on the amount of time spent in the pits, and not even in the pits, but on the pit exit and in the last corner of the pit exit. And I'm like, I'm in a wrong league. I definitely need to start improving.
No,
And
it's
yeah.
yeah. It's just that if you were like, especially as we were talking about the World Finals in that year, and me still missing to win the Manufacturers Cup, I really wanted to make sure that I went through everything, because one of my weaknesses and mistakes I've done on the previous year in 2019 was that I was always too lazy to practice for the strategies. Because back then we didn't have custom slipstream. Instead, we were using the realistic slipstream. And with the Red Bull, it was quite difficult to overtake once we were using the realistic slipstream. So because of that, I was mainly focusing on my qualifying pace, because if I knew that, because I knew if I had started either from pole position or from P2, I would have easily finished on the podium, like no matter how bad I was driving during the race. But the New York World event really showed me that I really should have practiced the race strategy as well, because this way I could have maybe tried out something different. Because in that race, yeah, everybody likes to talk about the drama between myself and Igor there. But in my mind, I was like trying not to blame everything onto Igor, but also trying to reflect onto myself.
Mhm.
Because unfortunately, I ran out of fuel, or let's say I had to save quite a lot of fuel in order to make it still. Because we were using such a high fuel multiplier during those years, where, for example, for tracks such as Autopolis, if you were fuel saving a lot, then you were winning the race easily. But for high-speed tracks, I realized it's better not to save as much fuel as on the low-speed tracks, because otherwise you're going to lose a lot of time on the straight line, and
Mhm.
this is going to end up quite costly for your own race pace. And this is something I kind of realized and also reflected onto myself, where yes, I should still try to practice on my qualifying pace, but at the same time, I should also try to have a look on the race strategies, like what kind of strategies are even available there. Because for Monza, that's also quite interesting. The fastest strategy was actually starting on the soft tires due to the way how the car was consuming fuel in the end.
Mhm.
Because of the soft tires, like if you had started on the soft tires, then went onto the mediums, I believe, after that, you were just barely able to make it with the entire fuel tank. Was it, I believe? No, sorry. I think with the soft tires, you were just able to make it that far where you just had to refuel a tiny bit in order to not to refuel again, I believe. Or it was something like that.
Mhm.
But it kind of forced you to use the soft tires in the end. And this is something, once again, not a lot of people realized back then. And me being able to win the Salzburg World event because of that. And this is why I'm like, yes, if you want to prepare for a race, not only you should look after your raw pace in terms of qualifying pace, but you should also have a look on your race pace, your race strategies, because in the end, where you get the points are by doing the races, right, and not doing the qualifying sessions. And this was my main weakness in 2019, where I kind of ignored my race pace and also the strategies in the end. But this is something I wanted to make sure to work on after that.
Well, I can say that you've done a pretty good job with that.
Thank you.
It worked in the end, I guess.
Thank you.
But no, it's just to me personally, it's incredible how you look at these things, or how did you look at those things in the past? Because nowadays, maybe because, for example, I evolved as a driver myself. I think you already were on a very high level, but now you can, let's say, watch other drivers do it first, and everyone is talking about it online, and everyone is now posting videos and having those kind of strategies, so you don't really have to think too much. But at the same time, if you want to be the best, you have to be the one that actually wants to explore something new, explore something different,
Yeah.
something that no one has ever touched at that point. And I think for me personally, that's the biggest struggle. And it's actually testing the races, because of course, testing the races, you have to do the whole race. You
Yeah.
cannot just, do a couple of laps, say that it's going to work. Maybe it's not going to work. So I think, as you mentioned, you should really focus on the race pace. But I don't know if you're going to agree with me, would be actually to spend a lot of time in the qualifying, really trying to figure out how to do each corner. Like really what works, as you mentioned in the introduction, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be second? Is it going to be third gear? Really focus on the details and then trying to build a strategy. So, I mean, you win the race in the race, not in the qualifying. But I think these days, maybe the field has become more competitive, so you actually need to really study and fine-tune your laps. So I don't know what's your take on that one.
I feel like I think I can kind of compare the current scene as in real life, especially with the students nowadays, where I think most of the people nowadays became a little bit more, let's say, lazier in the end in order to find the right solution or like the right strategy in our context here. Why did I say students? Because nowadays the majority of the students, they like to use ChatGPT, for example, in order to get the results. And I'm still like one of those students who didn't even use ChatGPT back then because I wanted to get my own work done, because so that I can really say that, hey, this entire work was done by me and not by like with the help of an AI in the end. And I feel like it's a little bit similar to with the competitive drivers nowadays, where instead of trying to find something for themselves first, they try to see and also copy what the others did. Because in terms of the race strategy, I would also recommend not only to focus yourself towards the fastest strategy, but also trying to just as a plan B in the end, to have another strategy available. Because there are certain races out there where the fastest strategy is not always the best strategy. Because let's say the fastest strategy would be like doing a free stop compared to a two stop, which would be like the safer strategy. On paper, it means that you would have to overtake people again. So you're like stuck in traffic. Therefore, you would lose time once again. So are you going to end up being quicker compared to the drivers doing a two-stop strategy still or not? And in 2019, I remember that race well because that's like one of my favorite races in terms of the strategies I've done there, which was the top 16 Superstars race for the Nations Cup at Autopolis with the Group 2 cars. Because back then, we were only allowed to use the soft tire compound, but the tire wear multiplier was so high that it kind of forced us to pit in at least once. But with the dirt air being, as you know, quite high with the Group 2 cars, if you were starting from pole position, then you could have maybe tried out to do this race with a zero stop. But if you had to do, like, if you wanted to do a zero stop strategy, then you had to drive so carefully in order to preserve your tires. But if you were driving smartly back then, you were able to defend your positions quite well, right? So I was the only one back then doing a zero stop strategy and winning the race in the end, I think by like 5 seconds or 6 seconds, even though the one stop strategy was the faster strategy overall, like if you were practicing in your own practice lobbies. So this is why I'm like, I think once the other people see that one strategy being the fastest strategy, they're just going to focus themselves towards that one strategy only. But I feel like if you have another alternative strategy open for you, right, which is maybe just 1 or 2 seconds slower, then you should still try to keep that as a plan B, because you never know how your qualifying session is going to be, and also how the first lap of the race is going to be like for you. Like if you are going to be involved in some carnages, or if something happens for you there, right?
Yeah. I mean, basically what you just said reminds me of a race that we had, I think it was a few months ago. It was also Autopolis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and it was about doing 2 to 3 stops. It was a 30-lap race, very high multiplier, Group 3.
Wait, was it where you were driving the Peugeot, the RCZ, I think? Because I remember one race,
Wait a second.
also on that track.
No,
Where
that was the other one. We had
okay,
another
okay,
one after, but I do remember that one where I was that driving that car and you were in
I was in the
Jaguar.
Jag. Yeah, in the Jag.
Yeah. And I know that was actually one of my like best view videos at
Yeah,
the
that was quite
time.
an enjoyable race.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, these guys are quicker than me, but I'm like, okay, I gotta preserve my tires.
Hmm.
And I got into the corner, like very smooth on the trail braking part, very, very easy with the steering wheel. And all of a sudden, it was like 80% into the race, and I see the GR Supra is not going anywhere, just literally stopping in the corner. Then I see the other guys. It was even like one of the best guys in the world. I think it was even Killian, it was Jose, I think it was
Yeah, it
him.
was Jose. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I don't remember who else was there.
Thomas Labotelli with the M6, I think.
Yeah. And I'm like, how's this happening? How do I have so great tires? Like, what? How do I know this and they don't know this? And then here you were, and I was like, literally, I think it was the final lap. I overtook
Yeah.
a couple of guys, and in that final, I think it was like literally the final couple of corners. You were struggling on those tires, and I'm like trying to go around the inside, outside, but on all the poles, that's almost impossible.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, it's a photo finish, but the Mazda that was behind me just overtakes us, both of us.
Yeah, it was
And
time killer. I remember that.
and I'm like, how did this happen? I'm trying to go for it, and then I ended up losing position, and I'm faster. Like, how is this working? I was like, at the same time, I was really happy that it was the way that this race went, and I was also very sad. So I'm like, uh, it was also frustrating, and I'm very happy at the same time. I don't know if you ever got that feeling, but that's autocross.
Yeah, I
guess.
do. But yeah, this is like one of those races where I think which we can use as an example where, yes, there might be a faster strategy. Maybe the one I was trying to use on paper would have been the faster strategy, like if you were using the BRZ or the M6. But I did realize that I should have used your strategy for the F-Type because the front tires on the Jaguar was kind of horrendous on that day. But yeah, when I saw you in my rear mirror, I was like, wait, what's going on? Because I think we were having a huge lead towards you guys with around 5 seconds, if I'm not
It was a
mistaken.
lot. It was
Yeah, it
uncatchable.
was a lot. And then, yeah, I was like, okay, I have to analyze what exactly happened because I have no idea.
And I think it was right after the update, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And then no one really knew what was going on. And I'm like saving tires. It looks like it's working. I'm catching these guys. But as you said, I need to analyze what happened. And then you were just quicker than me. So I can say goodbye then. But it was quite an experience. And I think it just demonstrates what you just said. You sometimes have to think about the tires more because overtaking is difficult. If you make that one stop, you're not going to make it because you have to overtake. So you have to really adjust to all of those things and not having that one strategy. So I do agree with you on that one. But it's kind of tough when you think about it. And in general, a lot of players don't really go on that high competitive level in Gran Turismo. Most of them just, want to have some fun, do the races.
yeah.
But I think even for them, it's good to analyze and understand what really happened. Because I see a lot of folks out there say, how can you do a good lap in, I don't know, 10 minutes? Because from my personal perspective, it's that you already understand what's going on and you just need to kind of change your reference points. You got to change a couple of gears and it works. So I don't know if that's the same process for you. So basically when you're adapting to a new track, like you already kind of know how the car works, but it's easier to adjust when you know what's behind it.
I think it really depends on the track. So for
Okay.
example,
Yeah.
if we have the Nordschleife, I mean, for whatever reason, I only need to enter the Nordschleife section, and I immediately have like the flow in terms of where the breaking points are and the way how I'm supposed to drive at the circuit. It's like one of my favorite tracks in this game.
I noticed that, by the way, this week in the Renault Megane, and he's pulling away from me. How?
Mate, that end result, man.
Yeah, 5,000. It was nice. It was actually nice. That was good.
But also like for Interlagos, because back in GT Sport it also used to be one of my favorite tracks because I was always quite successful at it. But normally, if I was driving at a normal racing track before, it only takes me like around 10 minutes maybe or 15 minutes to know like how you're supposed to drive in the end. I will not say world record pace, but still like a decent pace in the end because you can still end up finding a lot of time by trying to explore new things or like by trying out other things which you were not trying out within the first 10 minutes. Um, so yeah, I think it really depends on the track, and on the same time, it also depends on what kind of car you're driving. Because if we are driving a car which we're not really familiar with, so for example, I can maybe use those kind of cars for the Nations Cup as an example, like the Red Bull or the Super Formula, or like those kind of cars, right? Normally, it takes like a little bit more time to find a limit there, and I think it really depends on the combination as well, and yeah.
I think if we're going to move on, and basically you kind of answered on how much time it takes you to adapt to a new circuit, a new combination. So you said just about 10 minutes. But was it like that at the beginning, or it took you forever to find pace?
Um, are you talking about when I started sim racing for the first time, like back in GT6
But
or even in GT Sport,
I
those
would
kind of things?
say, let's say the early stages of your career where you didn't have a full understanding of
Okay.
what was going on. So how was that progression? I know it
Mm-hmm.
usually goes like you spend a lot of time and then as it goes you spend a lot less time.
Yeah.
But was it very similar to you?
Mm, I think for me personally, GT6 might have been one of the most difficult games out of the Gran Turismo series where I wanted to try and get used to a track and car as quickly as I could due to the way how the physics of that game was. Because in that game, the way how you were supposed to be quite quick at was to be drifty through the corners. Like you had to drift a lot through the corners, and if you wanted to be consistent with that, it's like really, really difficult to do that all the time. Like drifting through the corners, but also trying to nail the corner speed well and consistently all the time. But once we moved over to GT Sport, where the cars were feeling a lot more stable, that's why was able to feel, let's say, where I was able to feel more comfortable with the whole game in general. But in the end, it was a new game. You had to learn the new physics, the new tracks, because they were also a little bit differently scanned in that game. But then compared, well, not sorry, like moving from GT Sport over to GT7, I think most of the tracks and the way how the cars were feeling like was a little bit similar. So I think at the beginning, it was just the earlier stages where I had to try and learn the physics rather than learning the tracks and the car. Because even in GT7, whenever we got a new physics update, it was feeling like sometimes it was feeling a little bit different or like completely unique and new compared to what we were used to before. And I think this is the challenge you have in the end. Like try to get used to the physics instead of getting used to the car and the track first.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's the difficult part. Kind of once you get it, you kind of get it.
Mm-hmm.
But you always have a lot to learn. You always need to learn basically how a different car handles. But if you understand the core behind it, I guess it's easier. And also, the very that's one of I think the biggest questions in sim racing in
Mm-hmm.
general is that can a wheel actually help you in achieving something like that? Or in general, did it help you to achieve something greater, something that's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, potentially even expanding your potential, so to say?
For me personally, I would probably say yes to your question. Because when it comes down to racing games, it might sound weird, but I like to have the feeling of having everything under my control. Because for example, whatever, like whenever I want to do like specific input onto my steering wheel, so for example, by even steering smoothly or like correcting the car, um, due to it having like a slight oversteer reaction or something like that. I was able to do it with a steering wheel easier than with a controller, in my opinion. And it's like real life because even if I drive a car in real life, I would like to control everything in the end. And I feel like this is something I can do with a steering wheel instead of using a controller. I think if you just want to play cautiously and just have a relaxing time, um, yeah, just have a good time in the end, a controller is really, really good for that. But I think if you want to enjoy the whole experience of what's like driving a car on a racing circuit, and if you also want to push and go for the limit, I feel like you will feel more satisfied by using a steering wheel than using a controller, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, for me, that's my personal take on this one. So when I got from the controller to the wheel, I was naturally slower, but it just felt like I was more in control.
Yeah.
It was a different learning curve, but once you got it, you got it. And then when I just got back to the controller, I don't think I can really use the controller anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like so slow on the controller. I don't have the hand movements. While on the wheel, it's okay. You feel things, and since I got direct drive, it's much better than it used to. But I think you're not using a direct drive.
Not yet. I have no idea when I will be using a direct drive. because for now my beloved Thrustmaster TGT wheel is still working since 2019, even though I felt like it started to die on me just a tiny bit in terms of the force feedback, the pedal shifters, for example, because sometimes it doesn't want to downshift or upshift properly, so I have to use two fingers instead of one. But yeah, let's see. I mean, I don't know when I'll be using a direct drive, because in my opinion, going from a, let's say, normal or cheap steering wheel onto a direct drive or like to a more expensive wheel doesn't really guarantee you to find even more lap time on the track. Because for me personally, it's really important for you to feel comfortable with your equipment. Because for me personally, the feeling of your pedals is like more important than your steering wheel. Because if the springs of your brake pedal as well as of your throttle pedal is quite weak or like not really to your liking, then you won't really be able to utilize the entire performance out of your car, in my opinion. Because yes, with the steering wheel, you can play around with the force feedback setting as well as with the sensitivity settings, but you cannot really adjust the feeling of your pedal, in my opinion, apart from the dead zones. But still, like the travel distance is still something you have to feel comfortable and confident in the end.
No,
So
you just have to get used to it, so to say.
Yeah.
It's not going to mean that if you now spend 2,000 euros on a new setup and you're instantly going to go faster.
Exactly.
You have to understand what it does and how it's supposed to be driven. And I think only then you can start achieving better lap times or any kind of better results. But for me personally, I would say that the direct drives are, it's actually easier to catch up and it's easier to improve, but it still takes a while to improve. You cannot expect, I think you said in the introduction, you cannot expect that you're going to buy this and in one day you're going to be quicker. It still takes time. You still have to understand what works, what doesn't work, what kind of feeling does it give you, to adjust everything to your liking. And I think that's what makes you, better and more consistent driver in the end. So basically, yeah. And I think if we're moving into, let's say, the driving aspect of what are you doing right now after all of those, let's say, years and all of those preparations and just understanding what works. And I found that whenever you get into a daily race, and okay, I'm racing on Monday, everyone is racing, I guess, and you just pick that one car that no one would ever choose, and you're like quick with it. How does that work?
Well, for the daily races, right? Usually, what I always try to do is like have a look on the leaderboard first to see what the popular choice is for the daily race, but also at the same time trying to have a brief look onto the streamers' content. So, for example, what the majority of the people are also using for the race instead. Because there might be a car which might be good for one lap only, but not really good for the race due to the tire wear or something like that. So I only have like a brief look there, but then I try to think about like, hey, what if I use that car instead? Because it should be good, no, right? So, and one of my main, I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's like one of my main missions is like trying to show people that, hey, you shouldn't be using that one car only. Like, please try to use the other cars as well, because the other cars can be chosen as well if you want to have a good result with it or even having some proper battle on the track, in my opinion at least. Yes, there are a few cars which are a little bit harder to get the limit out of it, or maybe even compared to the meta car. But if you're like really, really, what is it? Like if you really determined to make this car work, then I believe you can also get a really good result with it in the end. And I feel like with this week's Daily Race C, at the Nürburgring with the Group 4 cars, I was actually pleasantly surprised that you could even use the FF cars in the end. Because normally people would avoid using the FF cars due to the way how you have to drive them, especially their lack of traction out of the low speed corners mainly. But yes, the slipstream helps a bit here. But overall, even when I was like in the lead or like not having any slipstream at all, I was still able to keep up with the meta cars in front of me. So I was like really pleasantly surprised with that. Um, but yeah, it's like trying to show people, hey, please use other cars as well. Please do that.
It works. It
Yes,
works.
it works.
But no, I mean, that's really a good opinion of someone that actually knows how to extract the most out of some cars. I mean, most of the cars. So, what do you think about the BOP as it is right now? Let's say in Group 3. I'm not going to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Because from my experience, you got 3 different levels, low, mid, and
Yes.
high speed BOP. And sometimes it feels like something is really working well on mid speed on some of the circuits, but when we go to, let's say, lower high, some of the cars are just way quicker. For example, the GR Supra at Daytona. So do you have a feeling like you can maybe, with your potential, get the cars to work almost the same?
I think if you would have all the top players driving the cars in the end, then you would probably still see like a difference in the end, like a time gap. In my opinion, the main issue is not really with the BOP, but rather the setup of the cars instead. So, for example, we have few cars in the game, such as the Aston Martin V12 Vantage,
Yeah.
where if you have a look on the downforce level of that car only, it has like minimum front downforce, but maximum rear downforce. Because of that, it cannot turn at all through the mid to high speed corners, but it also shows you how stable it is through the low speed corners. And I still remember like there was like one time at the beginning of this year, I believe, where I was invited to join them to drive for the, I think it was for the, was it for the 12 hours or for the 24 hours of Bathurst? But it was like an entrance race in the end where our team opted to go with the Aston Martin because we were also allowed to change the downforce level of that car. And when I was like trying to play around with the setting, I found quite a comfortable setting for myself. And it's really interesting because the BOP was the same, but once you changed the downforce level of that car, it was demolishing everything on the track. Because we also had Flexi using the AMG and Mini using the GTR on that track. But around that circuit with my downforce level, or let's say downforce setting, I was around 7/10 quicker than Flexi. So it shows you that, yeah, some cars, they just need a slight setup change in order for them to make it properly work. And I don't know, it's really difficult to say because even if you have a look on the high-speed BOP, not sorry, the high-speed tracks, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the Nürburgring Nordschleife, which is classified as a high-speed circuit. Then you can also take a look at the Monza one, which is also classified as a high-speed circuit.
Yeah.
Then, if I take the BRZ as an example, the BRZ is quite competitive at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Why? Because it has lots of high-speed corners, and it just excels at those high-speed corners due to the downforce setup of that car. But if I take the same car on Monza, it's going to be way off the pace, right?
Yeah.
So then, what are you going to do? Like if you only take a look at the Nürburgring leaderboard, if I can say that, yeah, the majority of the people are going to be like, yeah, nerf the BRZ, it's too fast, it's too OP. But if we have a race at Monza, then nobody's going to use it because it doesn't have any acceleration and top speed.
Yeah, it's.
And
I get.
I also remember like when we had the exhibition season for the Manufacturers Cup, which was at Fuji, I believe. The majority of the people on the leaderboard were the EMA cars. And I remember some Japanese people also, I don't know if it was Japanese, like from within the Japanese community or like in general, but them complaining about how good the EMA cars were in general. But then I'm like, okay, Fuji is like a track made for the EMA cars mainly due to Sector 3, because the EMA cars are so good through the low speed corners, and in Sector 3 you have a lot of low speed corners. But then, if we go over to Watkins Glen, it's another mid-speed BOP, but then you will have cars such as the M6, or the Lexus, or the GTR dominating there, right? Because on that track, you would not have as many low-speed corners as on Fuji, but more mid to high speed mid to high speed corners, which benefits those FR cars in the end. So it's really difficult to find a balance with the BOP in the end, in my opinion at least. And I wish more people would also understand that not all the tracks are like really the same in terms of the pace, because even if you have a look on all the tracks within a category here, like within the mid-speed BOP for example, they also have like the unique characteristics. I think ideally you would want to have one BOP for every single circuit. But yeah.
I mean, that was actually my next question. Would it be a good idea? But it's a lot of work, and I know even building those 3 BOP types, that's a lot of work. There's actually a lot of cars, and even today I posted a video on what I believe that should happen with GTN. It should expand the categories into like a smaller divisions, into something that is exclusively GT3 for maybe 8 to 10 cars, and then really balance those cars out. Or the other version would be, as you mentioned, like build BOP system for each circuit. And none of these is simple and easy.
Yes.
So I don't know, what's your take on that one?
I mean, for me personally, like before we would even take a look at either those two options you suggested before, I would probably try to have a look on adjusting the setup of the cars first, because there are few cars in this game right now which are kind of track dependent, if you know what I mean, due to the way how the suspension is like. So I can take the Jaguar as well as the Alfa Romeo 4C as an example, because both of these cars are so stiff in terms of the suspension setup, where if you have an even track, let's say Interlagos, they work there completely fine. But if I move over to Nürburgring, for example, which has so many bumpy corners and curbs, which you have to abuse, they are going to struggle there a lot. And this is something I'm like, you should maybe try to find a proper setup for those kind of cars first, before thinking about, okay, now we can maybe try to work on the BOP instead, because now we make the cars more drivable instead of track dependent.
Yeah.
And the Aston Martin is like another example I used before, but yeah, I think obviously we cannot use the downforce level I was using for the league race, because then it would be quite overpowered.
Yeah.
But still try to find a balance setting for the Aston Martin.
But I mean, that's strange because we had that one period in Gran Turismo where you could adjust the setup and people were actually complaining because some of the cars actually got really good while some were not that good. So I believe that people underestimate how much work it is to actually build a setup like that and make all of the cars drivable, because
Yes.
it's a very difficult task. But I think if we got 5 to maybe 6 cars that are drivable and very, very close to one another, we should more aim to that kind of approach rather than, trying to balance everything out, because you got for almost 40 cars per group. So that's quite a challenge, I would say.
But I think that's the beauty of the current Manufacturers Cup we have, where we have so many different cars where, let's say, if you like that specific manufacturer, then you can also try to represent for them in the end. Because that's the reason why I chose Subaru back then in GT Sport, which was not even the meta car. Or like, in fact, it struggled a lot to get some good pace with it. Excluding the 2018 season, because in that year I chose Nissan as my manufacturer, because we also had the Nissan GT Sports Cup competition, and you were only able to participate there if you chose Nissan as your manufacturer for that year. But apart from that, I really like to choose Subaru because it's my favorite brand. And
Mitsubaru, you mean?
Sorry. Yes.
So, kidding.
Thank you for correcting me here in the end. Look,
sorry.
I almost forgot about that one, but thank you for reminding me about that.
We need to make the collaboration come true.
Yes, we have to. Even selling some merchandise here.
That's actually a good idea, but okay.
Yeah.
Let's not reveal too much.
That's true. I'm sorry. I didn't want to spoil it too much here.
That's okay.
But going back to what I wanted to say, like with Subaru, because I knew it wasn't the fastest car, but it kind of gave me the motivation to try and become a better driver even. Because I was like, if I wanted to beat the faster cars, I had to become a better driver, or like being a better driver than the ones driving those better cars, right? So in other words, I had to try to make less mistakes than them, or like fewer mistakes than them. I had to try to be more consistent than them. I had to try, like even when I was practicing for the qualifying lap, that I was also able to deliver it once it matters, like those kind of things. And I was also kind of grateful that maybe Subaru wasn't really the best car back then, like when I used to compete. Apart from towards the end of the 2020 season, I think, because that's where the fuel consumption of the Subaru got buffed, which was really helpful because it wasn't the quickest car on the straight, and if your fuel isn't really the best, it didn't really help you saving a lot of fuel either. But this way I was also able to become a better driver, in my opinion, because I had to try and overcome myself and, let's say, breaking the limiter in order to beat the better cars, in my opinion. But I think with the Manufacturers Cup, it's like a really good idea, and I still believe we can still make it work. It's just that the setup of few cars have to be changed. Like it's such a shame because like you have certain cars in this game which really work for some track dependent tracks, but if you go to a different track, then they are kind of useless due to the lack of downforce, or due to them not being able to abuse the curbs as much as the M6 or the GTR, for example, or like those kind of things. And this is a shame, in my opinion, which I hope can be fixed in the future. Yeah.
And I have a feeling like maybe more players nowadays are becoming aware of their surroundings and aware of what might happen. And I think as everything developed in general, maybe in sim racing as well, I'm not going to say everyone. I'm not going to say that everyone does it. But I see more and more people like really getting into that state of flow and understanding how things work. So basically my question is, do you believe that sim racing will continue to evolve, or you think that maybe, we just got to a point where, you're just going to replace people, but the situation is going to be the same?
In terms of the racing itself, I think we are already quite at a high level in terms of what we can do on the track. But at the same time, it really depends on the drivers themselves, like the way how they want to drive on the track. And in my opinion, we should always try to strive for some clean and respectful driving on the track. Because for me personally, I always prefer finishing second while having a clean battle against somebody instead of finishing P1 by pushing somebody off the track, for example. Because yeah, I don't want to be known for that kind of thing where I only managed to win the race by forcing somebody off the track. And I think this is something you can also see with the current Formula One nowadays. Because like around 10 to 15 years ago, for me personally, I kind of preferred that kind of racing a lot more than what we are seeing nowadays instead, where um, that you were essentially allowed to push the other driver off the track as long as you were still ahead, like even slightly ahead than the other driver. But in my opinion, you should still give the other driver space so that he can still be on the racing track instead. And I hope sim racing won't become like this in the future, where it's also possible for the drivers to push the other drivers off the track easily by saying, hey, I was still slightly ahead, so I had the right to make the corner. Because I don't want to see those kind of controversial incidents happening in sim racing. And you also have the netcodes and the connections, which will make these kind of things even worse if we have that kind of racing being allowed on the racing track. But in terms of how sim racing might be like for the future, I hope we can see a lot more promotion for sim racing, because in my opinion, sim racing is still the only esports category where you can put a sim racer into a real car and you can still see like some similarities in terms of the driving, like from virtual to reality, in my opinion. And we know how expensive real motorsport is, but maybe with sim racing we can give those kind of drivers an alternative to still try to achieve the dream by becoming a real racing driver in the end, or maybe even experiencing something of it at least. And I just wished this would be promoted a lot more like sim racing, because when we talk about esports, and this is something I find a little bit sad in Europe especially, or like in Germany, they mainly like to talk about Call of Duty, CSGO, Fortnite, and those kind of games.
It's the only type of skill that you can actually transfer to real life. You can't play FIFA or EAFC, what it's called right now, or any kind of other sims, or for example, Call of Duty, and expect that you're going to do the same in real life. But for sim racing, apart from the actual, physical abilities and, really getting through the stint, we already had some good examples. So who knows? Maybe the future is even brighter. Maybe more sponsors will get there. Maybe we'll see another GT Academy.
Hopefully.
But yeah, I think I can agree with you. Maybe the future looks brighter than it seems. And hopefully, I guess we will see more drivers. Maybe
hopefully
getting in there and, achieving their dreams, I guess.
Yeah, because it was also one of my dreams to try and participate in the GT Academy back then, when I was still like a teenager. So I was like trying to not only to prepare myself by driving well in the virtual world, but also trying to get physically prepared. Because once I was watching a lot of GT Academy videos, I saw the amount of physical training they had to undergo in order to pass the tests, but also to show to the I will not say stewards, but like to the people who are going to decide which driver will end up as a racing driver for them. So yeah, I was like also trying to read the rules, and it was saying that you had to be at least 18 years old, but at the same time having a driver license. So I was like, okay, let's try to work towards that one. And once I turned 17 years old, I saw the news that GT Academy has been shut down. So I was like, oh no. Yes, so the dream was gone. But then, because there's a favorite saying of mine, for everything there's a reason. So I was like, okay, GT Academy has been shut down, so maybe there might be some better future opportunities in the future. And with the release of GT Sport, we also got the FIA Gran Turismo Championship, where as an alternative way, obviously, I was able to participate in and also managed to achieve my my achievements, which I'm also quite grateful for it. So yes, like even if a door closes, another door will open for you as an opportunity to explore that one, right? And you might even have a brighter future or like a brighter opportunity there in the end.
Yeah, I think you can be happy. Maybe, of course,
Yes.
there are always some, some wishes that unfortunately you were not able to get in life. But
Yeah,
I mean, if we were doing everything as intended, maybe some of our actions wouldn't be as fulfilling, so to say.
that's true.
But I just wanted to ask you, like, do you potentially have something that you do outside of Gran Turismo, or any kind of hobbies? Do you, I don't know, do you enjoy something else?
Yes, I do. Now, what I like to do recently is like trying to exercise a bit because I want to try and lose a bit of weight, if possible, obviously, in a healthy way. So this is something I do, and once I also exercise, my mental state also feels better and refreshed, if I can say that. If I have the time, I also like to play football. It's not called soccer, by the way. It's called football. I'm sorry for you. Always, always. Reading books, especially about mechanical engineering type of books in terms of automotive engineering, because I always feel like if you are able to gain and gather more knowledge, it's also beneficial for you in the end. But also trying to read a few books, which you're also quite interested in, right? And if I have the time, also trying to take a tour, like driving to places which I've never been to before and just trying to enjoy the scenery and the environment. So this is something I like to do, and also taking some pictures as a hobby photograph in the end.
Well, that's very nice. Like, it's, I guess, exploring other things, not just being, dedicated to just one thing and just spending your whole time
Yeah,
and, really trying to think of life as something that's, a little bit longer than a career in gaming, because I think
yeah,
a lot of people don't really understand how much commitment this takes. But at the
yeah.
same time, when you're sitting the whole day, who knows what might happen with your body? So it's really good to take care of that.
This is
And
why I also kind of dislike preparing for those, yeah, championship races all the time, because usually you have to spend a lot of time into your onto your preparation in order to be in a good position for the live events, right? So whenever let's say a live event was over, I was always trying not to touch the game for at least 2 weeks or something like that. So this was like my own vacation type of thing, where I was like just trying to turn off my mind in terms of Gran Turismo and trying to do something else instead of GT. And once I felt a little bit more, once I felt recharged and also better in the end, I went back to the game and tried to, yeah, prepare myself for the next championship again.
well, I guess you just sometimes need that refreshment. You just need a bit of time
Always,
off, and then when you get back, you're like full empowered, just trying
yeah.
to conquer everything. The leaderboard's usually number one. So
Because I feel like if you keep doing something which you don't really have the energy or the motivation for, you will just end up having depression or burnout. And once you have that, it's not good. And this is why I try to find like a balance life in the end, where I could still do the championships in the end, even though it wasn't really enjoyable few times. but at the same time also trying to do other things so that your mind can still be in a fresh state in the end. So you can still do so many things on the same time.
No, that's important. And I think we can slowly move to a closing of this. And I have that one final question. Maybe you don't want to answer that one. What do you think about the sequel of Gran Turismo? Do you have expectations about that one?
I have no idea about the next one. Like, if there will be a next one. Obviously, I have my few, like my own wishes, because I'm a huge fan of the older Gran Turismo series. But at the same time, even though you have so many critiques about GT Sport, because for them, the release of GT Sport was kind of the downfall of the Gran Turismo series, because that's where Polyphony or Yamauchi-san try to focus towards the eSports kind of thing. But in my opinion, I feel like we should still try to support the single player mode a lot more, like the way how the older Gran Turismo titles were like, because I really enjoy playing Gran Turismo 2, 4, 5, and 6 back then. Even though 6 was a little bit short compared to the other games I mentioned before. But at the same time, still trying to support the esports thing, because we are all a huge community where, in my mind, we should all try to support each other. And we all have our different interests in Gran Turismo. So, for example, few people like to enjoy some relaxing open lobbies where they're driving their Mazda SUV or like those kind of cars and just having a fun time. And this is something I also used to do back in the Gran Turismo 5 and 6 days, because it's really, relaxing to do it sometimes. Not always to drive competitively, like to have a good and fun time sometimes. But at the same time, then you can also support the esports scene where, we might get some updated racing cars. It's really difficult to please and satisfy everyone. And this is something I also learned in real life, because no matter what you do, there will always be few people complaining about anything in the end. So it doesn't really matter what you do. But it's like trying to find the right balance. And I hope and believe in the team that if there will be a sequel, that hopefully it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I found that even when I made this channel and started making more videos and the channel expanded, no matter what I do, there is always going to be someone that disagrees with you and someone that always doesn't like what you do. But I think we have to understand that Gran Turismo is doing a really good job, and till this point it's one of the best titles of all time. And trying to keep the single player and run the multiplayer for, so to say, competitive players is not easy.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, it's something that is doable. Hopefully it will be done. At least I can agree with you on that part, and I want something like that, because it would, get two categories or two different types of people happy with this. But I guess you will never make people happy, so just do what you do, I guess. So we shall see. We shall see if we will see anything. So I don't know. For the end, I wanted to thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge and experience and your whole journey with us. So thank you very much for that. And I'm sure that my viewers will appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, first I would like to thank you for inviting me, for which I think will be the first episode of this entire series here.
Hopefully.
No, it will be. Don't worry, because I'm the first one here. So we also established the Mitsubaru collaboration here, which we have to mention once again, right?
Absolutely.
Nah, but seriously, like, once again, I would like to thank you for inviting me for this series here. And it was a pleasure from my side to share like as much knowledge as I have with you, and also to the community. Because in my mind and in my opinion, we should always try to help each other out. Because in my case, if it weren't for the other people, I wouldn't be here. And I'm also trying to be a person where I could also try to help the other guys as much as I can. Obviously in my own power, like what I'm able and allowed to do, so that we can make the whole community and the whole scene like a much better place in the end. So I would like to thank you for that, and I also wish you all the best, and maybe hopefully see you in the next daily races.
Hopefully, if you take the Suzuki and I'll take the Meta car, and then we will race, and then we can race. So hopefully we'll see each other. But yeah, it was a pleasure once again. And guys, if you got any questions, please let us know down in the comments, and I guess we will try to. Yes, absolutely. There, we will try to answer, and maybe even Mikail will share his insights in the comments as well. So yes. I guess till the next episode. See ya and bye.
See ya.